It's time for Solomon to build the temple, and the first thing he needs is a guaranteed source of materials. How he goes about securing that is a model for any major project today. We're studying 1 Kings chapter 5, verses 1 to 12. Hi, I'm Ken Godevinus, and this is Digging for Scriptural Gems. Chapter 5 starts off with Hiram, the king of Tyre, contacting Solomon by sending his servants to him. He was glad to hear of his being appointed king after David, his father, that's Solomon's father, with whom Hiram was a friend, had passed away. And Solomon writes back and tells him of his plan to build the temple now that there was peace in the land and peace from former enemies, and how all this was as God had said it would be. And then Solomon asks Hiram to have his servants, with the help of Solomon's servants, cut cedars, the famous cedars of Lebanon, and send them down to build the temple. Solomon said he would pay for their wages, as these Sidonians, as they were known, who were Hiram's subjects, were famous for their skills in this regard. The NET says that Solomon also realized his own people could not achieve this task on their own. When he heard of the arrangement, Hiram was elated. The NET has him saying, quote, "The Lord is worthy of praise today because he has given David a wise son to rule over this great nation." Robert Jameson notes, however, that, quote, "This language is no decisive evidence that Hiram was a worshiper of the one true God, as he might use it only on the polytheistic principle of acknowledging Jehovah as the God of the Hebrews," end of quote. He sent word back that he would arrange to have cedar and cypress timber be cut and sent to Solomon. He even told Solomon how he would do it. They would be cut in Lebanon, taken down to the sea, placed on rafts or into rough raft bundles, sent down the river, unloaded, and there untied and turned over to Solomon. And then Solomon would give food to Hiram's household. Jameson says this reference was for a separate annual supply for the palace, different from that mentioned elsewhere in 2 Chronicles chapter 2, verse 10, which was for the workmen in the forest. The whole contract was drawn out formally in a written document, 2 Chronicles chapter 2, verse 11, which, according to Josephus, was preserved both in the Jewish and Tyrian records. Verse 10 tells us Hiram gave Solomon as much wood as he desired, and Solomon gave Hiram's household food and oil. And he did this year after year as needed during this contract. And then we're told God continued to give wisdom to Solomon so that he and Hiram remained at peace and even made a covenant, or really a formal peace treaty. Now, another word about Hiram. David Gusick quotes Dilday on him. Quote, "Hiram is an abbreviation of Ahiram, which means brother of Ram, or my brother is exalted, or brother of the lofty one." Archaeologists have discovered a royal sarcophagus in Byblos of Tyre, dated about 1200 BC, inscribed with the king's name, Ahiram. Apparently, it belonged to the man in this passage. Let's look closer at some more interesting background information, starting with Robert Jameson's comments about the lumber. He writes, quote, "Nowhere else could Solomon have procured materials for the woodwork of his contemplated building. The forests of Lebanon adjoining the seas in Solomon's time belonged to the Phoenicians, and the timber being a lucrative branch of their exports, immense numbers of workmen were constantly employed in the felling of trees, as well as the transportation and preparation of the wood. Hiram stipulated to furnish Solomon with as large a quantity of cedars and cypresses as he might require, and it was a great additional obligation that he engaged to render the important service of having it brought down, probably by the Dog River, to the seaside and conveyed along the coast in floats, that is, the logs being bound together, to the harbor of Joppa, 2 Chronicles chapter 2, verse 16, whence they could easily find the means of transport to Jerusalem, end of quote. Chuck Smith tells us, quote, most of these great trees were destroyed during the time of the reign of the Turks, but there are just today a very few cedar groves still left in Lebanon. Tragic. Used to be a beautiful wooded area, and now just a few cedars left, end of quote. David Gusick, quoting Maclaren, also points out something interesting about the phrase, I propose to build a house for the name of the Lord my God. He writes, Solomon also used this phrase because he wanted to explain that he didn't think the temple would be the house of God in the way pagans thought. He was now talking to Hiram. It is to be a house for the name of the Lord. That is not the same as for the Lord. Pagan temples might be intended by their builders for the actual residence or believed residence of the god. But Solomon knew that the heaven of heavens could not contain him, much less this house which he was about to build, end of quote. Gusick, through Maclaren again, makes an interesting possible point about Hiram's motives. He writes, quote, Hiram did not take unfair advantage, asking only for food for his household. At the same time, Hiram did expect to be paid. His service and the service of his people were not a gift or a sacrifice. There are a good many people today and through the ages who get mixed up with religious works and talk as if it would very near their hearts. People who have as sharp an eye to their own advantage as Hiram had. The man who serves God, and here's the lesson for us, because he gets paid for it, does not serve him necessarily. Just think of the various contractors or tradespeople that work today on the construction of churches, and I'm sure there are other examples. They should, at best, be considered a mission field. Okay, let's summarize Solomon's business strategy that we can copy or model. Number one, he was on a mission for God to deal with some unfinished business. Number two, he knew what he needed. Number three, he knew his limitations. Number four, he knew who he could call on and count on. Number five, he was willing to pay for the services he wanted. Number six, the details were finalized and the deal was put in writing. And number seven, a long-lasting friendship developed. We would do well to heed the approach he used. And I would add to it, perhaps a number 8, let our yes always be yes, and our no always be no. Next time, we'll see how the laborers, we've got the materials, now let's see how the laborers for the temple building are provided. Join us for that. If you like what you hear and see, please indicate so right here on the YouTube page that you're watching. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Digging for Scriptural Gems, so that you'll get more of these. When I put them up, you'll be notified. Share this if you like, if you want others to know about it, about what the Bible contains on this topic, and then keep on studying God's Word.